and welcome to Rolling with Two. I'm Will, and with me is my deep sea flounder,
Sarah.
And today we're doing a two-player perspective and accessibility for Aquatica. Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about this game?
All right, Aquatica is a tableau building hand management board game set in a fantastical underwater world. So let's take a look at how the rules change for two players.
It's very, very sneaky. So in the rules themselves, there's no mention of a two-player variant of any sort. However, one of the cards in your hand, and you'll always start with this card for every player, it says specifically to discard a character card from the row when this card is played. So the only rule change for two players is on a card in your hand, and you have to be aware of it because that's actually very important.
Right, but other than that change, which is very important, there's no rule changes and there's no bot in the game.
No nanoman?
No nanoman.
No nanobot?
No nanobot.
To the sea with you, nanobot.
So let's move on then to any issues we have with the two-player experience.
As far as issues go, I think it comes down to
whether or not you have the first or second edition of the game.
That's right. So in the first edition, there was a little bit of a hang-up when it came to moving the realm cards that you take by beating up or buying. And in the second edition, they cleaned all that up, and that's actually what makes it a very, very good two-player game.
Right. Yeah, the ability is called Scout, and it lets you take the current row of locations and push them into a back row. The thing is, the back row is smaller than that front row of locations. So I think it's only like 4 cards in the back.
Yeah.
So if you're pushing back 5 cards, you have to discard 1, which also makes for a very interesting choice because you could get rid of a location you think your opponent would like. And in the first edition, you evidently could not scout until the location front row became 4 cards or less to push it in the back.
Right.
And that really, like Will says, locks it up. That's the biggest issue for a two-player game in any game that has rows of cards is the change up of those rows. It helps that the movement of those rows usually happens in a larger player game, and you still need to simulate that in a two-player game.
Yeah, so if you see that in your rule set, chances are you have a first edition. Make sure to go online, find the second edition rules, because that is a much, much better experience for a two-player game.
And the great thing is the cards themselves, you don't have to change anything there. It just says Scout. It's the definition in the rule book that changed, so that works really well there.
Any other issues?
There are no other issues. Just to reiterate, moving on to what it does really well for a two-player game is the fact that the location row and the character row moves.
Yes.
Playing that matron or matrona or whatever it is. Matrona. Card it's the card that lets you pick up all your cards back up, and so that's a good reset kind of button to press of, okay, I get all my cards back and discard a character card to make sure that row keeps flowing.
Yes, because there's 3 ways a game can end: when someone fills up all 4 goals, when there's no more locations to put out, or when there's no more characters to put out.
Right.
So having those things move, especially in a two-player game, that's usually where these games fall apart, but this game excels at it.
Yes, it does a really good job. So then let's move on to accessibility. There are some issues with the readability. Not a whole lot. So this is a typical location card. Most of the lighter colored icons are easy to read. There are red icons, which is on that dark blue background. Again, it's going to depend on your vision. For some people, that's going to be really hard. It's not quite red on black, but red on dark blue is really close. So this could give some people some challenge on trying to read those icons.
Yeah. Additionally, on some of the mantas, there's the same issue, is the contrast isn't the best.
Right.
So make sure to have good light and maybe someone who can see
Because it's purple on dark gray, which, in my opinion, some shades of purple can be really close to gray as it is.
Yeah.
And it's a really dark gray. Some of the player color mantas are fine because they're brighter colors, but these are the wild mantas, which are going to be the most populous in the game. They can be really hard to read, and even I find they're difficult to read if we don't have a really strong light on overhead.
Yeah. Now, on the good side of things, the mantis are three-dimensional,
Yeah.
so you can feel whether or not they're face up or face down to show whether or not they're ready or not. A neutral thing was the player boards. They are triple layered because you slide cards in through the slots. However, you do still need some vision for that to help any. It's not like we've seen with other dual layer boards that can help you feel what's going on your player board.
Right.
This is just keeping everything in track so it doesn't shift around on you.
Right, because you still need to be able to see the icons, because that's what you're doing is as you use up an icon, you slide it up under the board to cover that icon, but then you have to see where the next icon is. So that, unfortunately, is not visually accessible. But it's still a good board. It still has a lot of good function. There's spaces at the top where you're going to put a discard pile and then a score pile. So those are still helpful little notches up at the top. But otherwise, this is more for the function of playing the game than anything that helps with accessibility.
Yeah. Any other accessibility issues that you can...
Not issues. So moving on to what it does right is the game is relatively open information.
Yeah.
You're supposed to keep your hand of cards secret, hidden, but honestly, there's not much anybody can do unless they're super trying to hate play, which is not going to benefit them.
Let's just say you have to go out of your way. There are cards. I think there's like a big shark character that can force someone's hand to like discard stuff. You have to go out of your way to really work at timing that to optimize that. For the most part, anytime they have to discard is bad. So why bother?
Right. And generally speaking, even that is not a very negative thing. It's usually going to slow you down or just inconvenience you. So we play open hand. Generally speaking, when Will takes all his cards back, I just help him put them into whatever order he wants in his hand. And then that way he's able to play them how he likes and needs my help as little as possible. But me knowing what cards he has, for the most part, everyone starts with the same set of cards. And over the course of the game, you're not buying a lot. This is not a huge deck building aspect. You're going to gain maybe 5 or 6 new cards over the course of the game. It's not a whole lot.
Well, that's if you're playing a long version.
That's true.
We've had really short games too, so...
well, I mean, that's the race to the finish.
Yes.
So generally speaking, we just deal with that as open information. So that makes the game for us completely open information. Yeah. And then, like you said earlier, the mantas being three-dimensional, I wish they were a little bit more, but there is still a flat side versus a textured side for you.
Yeah, you feel more of the fins of the side to tell because they curl a certain way, and you're like, as long as you know it's that way is up or that way is down, you're good.
Yeah. So that's about it for the accessibility.
So would you recommend it 2 players?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah. This is a very solid 2-player experience. I'm not opposed to playing this more players. I would love to actually experience that, but it's already a pretty tight experience for 2 players as it is, competing over everything.
Yeah, and it plays fast. It gets on the table, off the table really well, and you feel like you have lots of meaty choices in this 2-player environment. So definitely recommend it as a 2-player game. Accessibility wise,
it would be yes with help because of the issues we've stated. Someone with vision disabilities is still going to need help with the icons on the cards and manipulating the cards in their player board. So they're still going to need some help.
Yeah, and I thought I was going to have more trouble with this game because when it comes to the locations, there's actually multiple levels to a location, and that becomes rather important when you're chaining off abilities, where you're pushing it up and raising this one and getting the benefit from that one. However, I never really did get overwhelmed with it,
No.
and because your main action is from your card, and your card will let you recruit or conquer a location, buy a location, whatever the main action is. Everything else supports that. So therefore, you kind of have a focus to how all these cards come together and work together to make this nice synergy. So yeah, accessibility is definitely yes with help, and I had a fun time.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, that will do it for us here at Rolling with Two. If you want to get a hold of us and give us any comments, questions, concerns, you can reach us at any of the social medias at
Rolling with Two, that's TWO. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and please check us out on YouTube. Please like and subscribe.
And why would you ever want to roll with just one when you can be rolling with two?